One of the fundamental essences behind spiritual development lies in the awakening of a genuine understanding of how interconnected our lives are with the universe and its myriad expressions. It is in recognizing that we are part of a vast reality that surpasses our individual understanding and that we are not separate from each other, that kindness naturally blossoms forth, a fragrance of the spirit and our true being. However, when we lack a grounded sense of our own self and the potential that thrives within us, a profound disconnection arises. This sense of disconnection can propel us into a mental labyrinth, where our intellect, instead of illuminating the path, fuels judgments, comparisons, and self-doubt. Certainly, critical thinking, as well as the competitiveness of sports or activities leading to self-improvement, plays a fundamental role in honing the necessary skills to navigate the world's complexities. But here, we are not talking about that kind of comparison. The disconnection from who we are creates space for an immense sense of lacking, impossible to be fulfilled by external means, as it is a result of internal imbalance. Thus, it generates feelings of inferiority and powerlessness. We find ourselves separated from others, unable to perceive our own nature, to feel whole, and consequently, we compare, judge, and compete. This lack dominates our sense of worth, leading us to seek ways to numb these difficult feelings through attention and energy from others, generating temporary validation and well-being. The problem is that to receive this attention and energy that nullifies the sense of powerlessness and lack, we start to dominate and manipulate others, pulling people down. We do this in various subtle ways, and most of the time unconsciously. This is one of the strong realizations of how deeply we can be lost in the cycles of ignorance. Therefore, it is essential to recognize that walking in ignorance is like being imprisoned in the dark, in a state of self-forgetfulness. Recognizing that we are trapped in the cycle is the first step towards liberation. There are different ways to perceive our bonds so that we can then begin to untie them. One of these ways is through the recognition of the fear of intimacy. This fear is also related to the absence of authenticity, which is actually rooted in the fear of rejection and the lack of truth. Recognizing this fear is not easy, but once it surfaces and we realize how much it limits and keeps us bound, a crucial process begins in our lives. However, recognition alone is not enough for us to navigate the challenging labyrinth of freeing ourselves from the fear of intimacy. This requires some degree of clarity, even humility, so that we can open ourselves to life and the intelligent system it is, allowing spirituality to operate and bring us the resources, teachings, and understandings to go through this process. We all fear intimacy, and this is because we do not truly know ourselves even at a personal level. How often do we encounter aspects of ourselves that seem peculiar? How often do we feel uncomfortable with ourselves, with our way of being, speaking, or even doing certain things? Naturally, we also find it challenging to relax in the presence of others. Intimacy, after all, is about revealing ourselves to others. It involves removing the masks. But what are these masks? Here, we talk about the masks we learn to use as a defense mechanism born out of a sense of vulnerability. They were mostly generated during our childhood, serving as a shield against the shocks of pain we experienced in that phase. The masks are a way for the child to seek acceptance because, from a very young age, they learn that conformity is the key to acceptance. The spontaneous expressions of children, depending on the social and cultural context they are in, are often met with rejection, causing much suffering. The pain of being rejected is an emotionally intense experience for a child who does not yet have emotional resources to deal with it. And depending on how often they receive this rejection response, the fear can become more potent. Early on, they learn that to nullify this pain and prevent future emotional shocks, they need to adopt different facades, pretending to be someone they are not. This is the moment when the disconnection from the truth of oneself and intimacy begins. Intimacy requires authenticity. It demands that we first be able to accept ourselves in order to then reveal ourselves to others. But we continue to resist, fearful of being authentic. The root of this resistance lies in our fear of revealing our truth and experiencing rejection once again. We are afraid to expose our vulnerabilities and imperfections, and in doing so, we also close the channel through which we could reveal our potential, strengths, and beauty. Thus, behind the deepest fear of intimacy lies the fear of not being accepted. This fear needs to be identified and confronted because it keeps us hostage to a life expression that is incompatible with who we really are. And this incompatibility manifests in different contexts and dimensions, causing pain, inadequacy, and difficulty in connection. But confronting this fear means taking the risk of being rejected, of not being accepted as we are, and having to deal with it. However, this is the only way to break the chains and free ourselves from the prison in which this fear keeps us. We need to take the risks and consequences of our vulnerability to then live a life rooted in the truth we carry within us. Sooner or later, we will need to deal with criticism, deal with rejection. Facing these challenges is necessary, even if it is uncomfortable and unpleasant. This discomfort carries the keys to our liberation, and therefore, we cannot escape this stage of the journey. By freeing ourselves from the need for approval and acceptance from others, we can truly be ourselves, presenting ourselves with wholeness. And thus, intimacy begins, able to be present and permeate different types of relationships that we nurture. However, the most challenging part of this process of being true and presenting oneself to others with authenticity lies in healing our rejection of ourselves, healing our inability to accept our imperfections. We have a strong internal critic that we must confront, which always points out what it deems inadequate. We feel shame about these inadequacies, these aspects of our personality with which we need to reconcile, and therefore we hide. We have been taught that certain aspects of ourselves are ugly or wrong. Our society still takes advantage of ignorance, judging behaviors as right or wrong, beautiful or ugly. Governed by the desire for acceptance, the wound of exclusion, and the need for belonging, we continue to hide these ugly parts of ourselves, pretending to be flawless. Consequently, the fear that by getting close to others, they will notice our flaws, only grows, and thus another chain of the fear of intimacy imprisons us. Therefore, if we genuinely want to conquer this fear and transcend it, self-acceptance is crucial. We need to accept even our imperfections and aspects that we perceive as ugly. And some of these aspects, if looked at honestly, may not be so ugly after all. They are also part of reality. Yet the fear of intimacy does not end here. There is an important counterpart that also manifests in our approach to others. We also place many expectations on others. We can see this by recognizing that we treat people well, with care, affection, and love when they conform and behave according to our expectations and rules. As long as they follow a script of what we deem right for them, we are falsely open to show appreciation. But as soon as they deviate slightly from the behavior we expect from them, we distance ourselves. This happens because deep down we long for intimacy, but we demand that others behave the way we want them to. We punitively judge their actions and words, so we place many conditions for the love that resides in us to express itself to others. Thus, we fail to accept others as they truly are, and consequently, we fail to open ourselves to discover the person behind the mask, behind the disguise. They do not feel safe to present themselves as they are. Unconditional love is not about the absence of boundaries. It is about openness to see the other, perceive the other, connect with the other in a way that transcends control and the desire to shape the other into some specific way of being that pleases us. Therefore, we can perceive that the problematic common denominator in these processes is judgment. But we have the potential to go beyond, to be authentic, accessing that space of unconditional love that breaks through the masks. How deep can our lives and relationships become when we embrace our inner truth and begin to express our real desires, insecurities, failures, and longings, while also creating space for the people we connect with to express their most intimate and vulnerable side? Confronting our fear of intimacy gives us the key to access the truth that dwells within ourselves and others, and thus live a life truly rooted in the connection of who we are.